Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Sports Talk with Austin, your daily dose of entertainment and sports talk. And today, I'm going to be going over the top 25 AP poll for week one of college football in today's video, as you can already tell by the title of the video. So, there's a lot of things that we have to discuss. You know, a lot of big things happened over the weekend. But let's talk about the college football week one AP poll and get my instant reactions and thoughts. So let's start at number one, the reigning defending national champs, back-to-back Georgia Bulldogs, sticking at number one. I have no issue with this, you know. The preseason number one because they won back-to-back, and they didn't play nobody. They played UT Martin, so you expect them to win that game. They struggled a little bit at the beginning. Carson Beck had his struggles, but they got it together and they won. You know, and I'm okay with putting them at one. On number two, Michigan. Once again, there's not much for a debate, argument there. I feel like Michigan, they're arguably the most complete team in the Big Ten this year, and maybe the most complete team behind Georgia, maybe even Florida State, LSU. You know, for best teams. But Michigan did what they're supposed to. J.J. McCarthy balled out. The defense, even without Jim Harbaugh, they got it done. Coming in at number three, Alabama. Now, this is very interesting. You know, I get why they were put here because they're Bama. But also, Jalen Milroe looked really good against Middle Tennessee State. He balled out. You know, he showed what he could do. It's just, we also need to see more of this against better competition, which we're going to next week against Texas. And I feel like then we'll know how good Alabama truly is. But for number three, I'm good for that right now. Now, at number four, we got Florida State. I feel like they could have arguably been put ahead of Alabama, maybe even Michigan, because of the way they took care of business against LSU. You know, many people believe, is Florida State, were they going to be as good as they should have been? Is the hype real? Well, they showed it against LSU, and Jordan Travis looked like the Heisman contender that everyone thought he would be in preseason. Mike Norvell, the defense was flying around. Florida State, I think, is legit, and for them to go to number four, I'm okay with that. I feel like you could have shifted them with Bama, but I get why it's week one. You can't take too many things out of proportion. But certainly them being in the top five is the right ranking, and I think the committee got that right. Now, at number five, Ohio State, who had plenty of question marks, and they also showed a little weakness against Indiana, in my opinion. I feel like Indiana kept it a lot closer than the score would indicate, you know, and Kyle McCord was a game manager. You know, he really didn't make any flashy plays down the field. He just did what he was supposed to, relied on the run game. And the fact that Indiana wasn't as big of an opponent as, say, LSU, obviously, but Ohio State got it done, and it was able to be enough that day. But when Ohio State plays the Michigans, the Penn States, the Minnesotas, how good is McCord going to look? You know, against Notre Dame coming up here in a few weeks. You know, how good is he really going to look? You know, we just got a small sample size. Indiana doesn't really tell you much, but I think number five, you know, I think because it's Ohio State, you can make the argument that they should be in the top four. But I get why Florida State, they had too impressive of a win to keep them behind Ohio State. But I think five, you know, you can make an argument the way they struggled with Indiana. You could maybe drop them at 9 or 10. But I feel like the teams behind them, you could say don't deserve to go any higher. But I think number five is okay for week one. We'll know a lot more about a lot of these teams as the weeks go on and the year goes on. Coming in at number six, USC, Caleb Williams. Obviously, the biggest question mark wasn't the offense or whether Lincoln Riley could coach. Those were never any of the questions. question is their defense can actually hold up. Well, against San Jose State, didn't do very well. Against Nevada, they did good enough, but we can't take it out of proportion. We can't say, "Oh my goodness, USC's back; they're going to win it all." We can't do none of that just yet. We have to be patient. I think number 6 a fair ranking just for the fact of they played Nevada and San Jose State week 0, week 1. I think you have to go off who you played. And I feel like, yes, because they have Caleb Williams and the high flying offense, that also helps a lot. But it's also because they're USC as well. And I think USC, number 6, I think is fair. Now, at number 7, we have the Penn State and Indy Lions. At number 7, they're the same ranking as they were to begin the season. They didn't go up, they didn't go down. They kind of stayed the same. And I feel like, obviously that sends a message that beating West Virginia obviously was not as impressive as maybe some people thought it was. And which, many can argue and say, oh, West Virginia really isn't all that. Neil Brown's going to get fired anyway, so Penn State beating them was expected, which exactly is the case. They were expected to beat them. So at number 7, I think you could make an argument, could you have moved them at least ahead? This is where the case comes in. Could the AP have moved Ohio State maybe to 7th? But, I get why. Because Penn State is not as big as brand as Ohio State and USC, and they beat up on West Virginia, which is what it is. At number 8, a team who was on upset alert last week, Washington. Absolutely, after that first quarter, Michael Penix and that offense lit them up. Lit up Boise State and made sure they understood who were the top dogs. And Washington looking better than ever. It's only week 1. No need to overreact. But if they keep this up, they're likely the favorites to win the Pac-12. Ahead of USC, ahead of Utah, ahead of Oregon. But they did what they were supposed to do. They got a little pushback there at the beginning, but then after that, it was kind of Washington's show, and there it was. So at number 8, I get why they put them there. From what they were they were at number 10. They jumped them 2 spots. Nothing too really high because you can't jump someone so many spots off the team because you have to see who the team plays and what the strength of schedule is, and you have to base it off what they're going forward with. So number 8, I'm cool with. Number 9, Tennessee. They were number 12. They jumped 3 spots. I think them jumping to number 9 after beating Virginia, I get it. Joe Milton, that offense looked really good, but you also have to put in proper context. They beat Virginia, and who's arguably one of the worst teams in the ACC this upcoming season. So it's not much of a thing that you can really brag about, saying, oh, we beat Virginia, we should jump Washington and Penn State. I think, Tennessee fans, I'm sure, understand this as much as I do. It's all about who you play, like I've said. And I think here, one of the big things is Tennessee, you played Virginia, you look really good. You're in the top 10 like you should be. Let's wait till you get to some better opponents like I've rephrased. Now, coming in at number 10, Notre Dame. They have a lot of hype. Sam Hartman looked really good the first 2 weeks. But once again, it's a case of it's week 1. You didn't play anybody in week 0 either against Navy. Week 1 against Tennessee State, you could say, didn't play nobody. And that's a fair assessment of everybody in the top 10 except maybe Florida State. You can make the comparison, you didn't play nobody. So we can't really judge off how good you are. So I'm okay with this ranking at 10. I think Notre Dame did what they were supposed to, and they looked really good doing it. Now, if they would have struggled against Navy and Tennessee State, then you would have had a problem, but they didn't. They took care of business, and they look like Notre Dame of old. Sam Hartman and that running game looks like something fearsome. Now, number 11, Texas. Now, obviously, we get why they're here because they're Texas and and they always think they're back. But deep down inside, we know Texas, the proving game is going to be next week at Alabama, which I will talk about later on in the week when I preview week 2. That is going to be your prove it game. If you can beat Alabama, who is third according to the AP committee, then Texas might truly be back. But then you can't follow it up with a dud of a performance later. You got to keep going up and up and up. So for right now, having them outside the top 10, I get why. Because they're Texas, they got a lot of height. Quentin Ewers looked good, but you also played Rice. A lot of these teams with inside the top 10, Texas case number 11, top 11, you really didn't play much of anybody except Florida State. They are the one exception. So you can't really judge much of anything just yet, because you're playing the Indianas, the Nevadas, the Tennessee States, Navies of the world, and no Tennessee States. So you really can't judge just quite much yet. So I'm okay with this. Now, Utah coming in at number 12 in the AP poll. Now, this is where some people may have some disagreements because the way Utah did it with a backup quarterback, they went and beat Florida at home. Bryson Barnes, Nate Johnson looked fabulous on that Thursday night, dominant home opener win. And many people believe since Florida's an SEC team and Utah did it without no Cam Rising, Brent Keithy was gone, but it did not matter. The defense balled out. The offense stepped up. And many people believe, you can put Utah in the top 10. And, there's that big argument right there. Is it because Utah's actually good? Or is it because they beat Florida? Which, let me preface by saying Utah is very good. But the argument is Utah as good as we think they are? Or is Florida just bad? And, number 12, I think that is a little low. But I get, Utah's not as big a name as Texas and Notre Dame. So I understand why they put them here. I just don't agree with it. I would say you can maybe jump them ahead of Tennessee at 9, but just based off their performance and how great they looked in it. But they got Baylor this week. Let's see if they can keep it going. And let's see how Texas does. Things will fall in line like that. Now, at number 13 comes another Pac-12 team, the Oregon Ducks. Bo Nix and company scoring 81 points. That is highly impressive. But to put it in its proper perspective, they did it against Portland State. So there is that to consider. So 81 points is awful impressive compared to what they did last year, losing 49-3 to the eventual national champs. But you beat Portland State. Yes, I get the 81, and Bo Nix and the company looked really good, but we really can't gauge how good Oregon is just yet. I get you have to reward them for the fact that they did dominate the way they did, but let's be honest, I don't think, Oregon's going to put up 81 points every week, obviously. I think next week against Texas Tech, just along with a lot of other teams, we're going to get to see how good they truly are. I think Texas Tech's going to be a good road test for them. Now, coming in at number 14, LSU, and this is justified. After being number 5 to start the season and then to get stomped by Florida State, yeah, I think 14 is justified. You could have dropped them maybe even to 15 or 16, and I would have been okay with that because the way Florida State stomped them into the ground was ridiculous. Jordan Travis made that defense look silly. Jaden Daniels looked like a shell of his former self in that game. And, Brian Kelly consistently again, did not show up in the big game and in many people's eyes. And it hurt LSU in this scenario. Now they're behind the 8 ball, and now they already are 0-1, and they've got a lot of big games ahead. They got Alabama still, and they've got more big games in the SEC upcoming. So this was a game that they really should have and needed to win to ensure that they were able to keep their spot. But they'll get a chance to bounce back this week at home. I think they'll get it done. They're playing at home against Nicholas, so I think they should be able to get it done. Now at number 15, Kansas State. Now we get to the point in this part of it is where most of it's kind of the bigger teams getting upsets and bigger wins. Kansas State did what they were supposed to do. You know, they beat down on a cupcake opponent. So, and plus they're the defending Big 12 champs. You know, like I said, you could have made an argument that they should have jumped LSU, but LSU did play Florida State, so there you have to put that in its proper context. So I feel like you can give LSU some slack as Kansas State played a cupcake opponent. They didn't play anybody worth a note, so I understand that, and I respect that they put them at 15. Now at number 16, coming off a fabulous win against San Jose State, Oregon State. DJ looked really good. That Oregon State O-line, that Oregon State defense was just flying and looking really good. You know, the Beavers are finally earning some respect on their name, and they should after that performance, but it was San Jose State, and they did look better than USC, I might add. And, you know, and I'm sure a lot of Oregon State fans are going to tout that to the USC fans. Look what we did. We held them to 10 points, and we scored 42, and we looked really good doing it. Our defense didn't give up 28 like you. But Oregon State at 16, I think, you know, with all that being said is I think 16 is a good spot for him right now. Now at number 17, jumping 4 spots, North Carolina, who all of a sudden found a defense. You know, last year their defense was atrocious, and that's being nice. And they had 9 sacks on Saturday over South Carolina, the big win over South Carolina. Drake May and company, you know, looked decent, you know. There was a couple errors and throws. You know, the running game for North Carolina really pushed him over the edge. And the fact that Spencer Rattler just couldn't throw, he was turning the ball. He didn't really turn the ball over much. It's just that North Carolina pass rush got home. And I think, can North Carolina, was this an anomaly? Are they going to have this type of pass rush all year? Or is this just because they were playing South Carolina, who had a lot of hype as well? You know, it'll be very interesting to see. But for them to jump to 17, that shows that is a really, really big win in the AP polls eyes. And many people realize that, oh, North Carolina's defense might actually be good. But they got a big game against App State this week. So who knows what's going to bring with that, because App State has been known to pull off some shockers, just like they did against A&M, so we will see. Now, coming in at 18, the Oklahoma Sooners, who everyone was ready last year to throw the baby out with the bathwater, as my good friend Jackson Johnson of the Jacksonian always says. So, now, all of a sudden, Brent Venables has had a year to get his offense and his defense corrected, and they took Arkansas State, and they were able to just absolutely dominate them. You know, they did what Oregon did, 73-0. You know, but once again, like I said with Oregon, you didn't play nobody. You didn't win any really big game. So you kind of had to put it in its proper context. You know, 18. You know, many people would argue saying maybe Oklahoma should have been unranked based off the year they had, but the fact is Oklahoma still gets a lot of talent. Brent Venables can recruit now. He's now got his batch of kids in, and I think they're going to look really solid this year. And I think this was a nice 18. I think it's a good stepping point. I think Oklahoma will probably more than likely be in the Big 12 championship game, if not win it, but we are a long way away from that, so all very interesting. Now, a team that didn't move whatsoever, number 19, Wisconsin, Luke Fickell, his first year. They started off at home against Buffalo. They won that game, and they did it in convincing fashion. And I guess the AP committee did not really see a reason to move them or leave them where said let's leave them where they are and let's see how they do in the coming weeks. Which, looking at who's behind them and who's ahead of them, you can say there's not really a spot you can move them up because their win wasn't as impressive as Oklahoma's and Kansas State's and Oregon State's. But then you look behind them when we get down that way here in just a second, you could say you don't really want to move them down either, even though there's a couple wins and a couple losses that you could say maybe Wisconsin could have moved up somewhat. But I think 19 for a first-year head coach and the fact that they beat Buffalo at home is a really good win. So 19 is approved, and I think all is well. Now at number 20 is the Ole Miss Running Rebels. Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss checking at 20. I think that's a fair assessment. They beat up on a nobody. They didn't play anybody of note. So once again, a lot of these bigger teams have played the nobodies and the cupcakes and the teams, that you should beat, except if you're Baylor, who lost to Texas State. But obviously they're not in this. But I think it's very interesting that they put them at 20. They're basing a lot of this off potential and talent. Could you make the argument that Ole Miss is a better team than Wisconsin with a more experienced coach? Sure, but they feel like Wisconsin's going to do more. So Ole Miss at 20, I think that's a fair assessment for right now. Now, speaking of big assessments and big wins, number 21 Duke. They did Clemson dirty, 28-7. Open last night, the Monday night game. Riley Leonard, and I'm going to come out in the public and say this now. I'm sorry to all the Duke fans. Y'all are for real. I called your schedule soft last year. I said you wouldn't be able to win as many games this year. But the way you looked against Clemson wouldn't surprise me if you're competing for the ACC this year. Maybe even a sneaky dark horse New Year's Six. Y'all went from unranked to 21, and you should, because that was a massive, massive upset. And Riley Leonard, the defense balled out. Cade Klubnik never had time, which we'll get to Clemson. Shockingly, they're still ranked, but we'll get to them in just a second. But this is just an overall all-good round win for Duke. Mike Elko, congratulations. I apologize for ever doubting you. I think Duke, your sky's the limit. The special teams, Duke did everything right last night, and Clemson just could not do anything right. And I think that propelled them to a win. And putting Duke at 21, I think that win over Clemson, where they were ranked previously at number 9, you could have jumped them over Ole Miss and Wisconsin. Some people even said maybe even jump them in the top 15. Is the hype that real? We'll have to see. Now, coming in at number 22, speaking of big wins, it's prime time. Something time to grind. Colorado, who beat the national championship and number 17 at the time, TCU, the runner-ups in the national championship. Now, if you want to talk about a team that shocked the world, it would be primetime in Colorado. Everyone was calling Colorado an absolute dumpster fire. They weren't going nowhere. It was going to be a long year in Boulder. They'd be lucky to win 3 games. But beating the national championship runner-ups, Chenault Sanders, Travis Hunter, having a beastly game. Colorado, like Primetime said in his post-press conference, he's got receipts of everybody that doubted him. And now he's got a lot of people jumping on his bandwagon. Like Coach Prime said, I've got room. Come join. Because the people that believe were in that locker room, and me, myself, personally, I've been a Colorado believer since day one. I predicted this team to go 8-4, 7-5. I said this team, the sky's the limit. Coach Prime is going to coach the boys up and make them into something special. And everyone laughed at me and thought that I was drinking too much Primeade. Well, looking at it now, It doesn't look so silly anymore. So I think Colorado at 22. Shoot, yeah, let's keep it going. Hopefully they can beat Nebraska on Saturday. We'll see how legit Colorado truly is. Be interesting. Now, coming in at 23, a team last year who had all the expectations in the world and then just fell very, very short at 5-7. Texas A&M. You know, many people. Last year they were preseason, I believe, top 10. I believe, and now many people are wondering, possibly why they are so low to start. Well, what they did last year at 5-7, it's understandable why they're ranked this low. And yes, they do have a lot of talent. Jimbo, Bobby Petrino, who's calling the plays, but Texas A&M, they did do what they were supposed to. They did win the game they were supposed to. But Texas A&M has got to prove themselves again, even though they have all this 5-star talent. It just doesn't matter. You still got to prove yourself and prove your worth to the committee. So I think 23 is a good spot until they prove themselves, until they beat Tennessee or Alabama, who they play this year, or until they beat LSU at the end of the year. Until they beat some of these bigger teams, 23 is good, just based off what they did last year. Now, coming in at 24, the Tulane Green Waves, I think, a great win over South Alabama. Michael Pratt looked really good. Tulane coming off a big Cotton Bowl win against USC last year. The potential and the sky is the limit for this team. I think they're going to look really good. I think Tulane could possibly be the favorite in the American, obviously. Maybe even make another New Year's Six. I think 24 for right now is a good standard for them. I think they got Ole Miss, who's number 20 in this week's AP poll. Next week, I think that'll be a really interesting game. I think the winner of that game is going to have a lot of say in who moves up and who moves down. Now, coming in at number 25, after dropping all the way down from they were number 9 going into Duke, and now at 25. How the mighty have fallen, people. How the mighty have fallen. Because Duke now can say, has Dabo lost it? Can he, because he can't, there ain't another Trevor Lawrence walking through that door, obviously. Cade Klubnik's the guy now. Has Dabo lost? Like I said, Dabo lost it because he doesn't use the transfer portal. Is he going to fix the holes like Alabama did? But, it's one of those things. It's just very interesting dropping them all the way to 25 because they did look really bad against Duke. I mean, they had a blocked field goal, a tip field goal, 2 blocked field goals, tips, however you like to call them. Klubnik just didn't look comfortable. He did throw that pick at the end, and Riley Leonard just ran up and down the field for Duke on Clemson, and the fumbles, boy, that just drives Dabo nuts. So dropping them from number 9 to 25, yeah, I could see why. They did not look very good, not at all. But that is my thoughts and instant reactions to the AP poll, ladies and gentlemen. I hope y'all enjoyed. Please like, comment, subscribe, turn on notifications to Sports Talk with Austin down in the comment section below. Make sure you do all those things, and I will be back soon for College Football Week 2 preview and talk about all the great games that are coming. But until then, peace out, everybody.